What's up, everybody? In today's video, we're going to be discussing the book Turning Pro by Steven Pressfield. And this is another one of Steven Pressfield's book about becoming a creative and pursuing and following your creative pursuits and how you do that. And if you remember, I reviewed The War of Art, where Steven Pressfield talked about facing resistance and turning pro. But turning pro was a small part of that book. This is obviously a bigger overview of what it takes to turn pro. And the reason I got this book is because I got it as an audiobook. It was pretty cheap. It was only $5 compared to most audiobooks are more expensive. And it was similar to The War of Art, so I'm like, why not just buy it? But if you read The War of Art, do you need this book? I don't think you necessarily need this book. But who would I recommend this book to? I would recommend this book to anybody that needs motivation, because there's a lot of motivational quotes in this book that you can re-listen to this audiobook many times. And that's frequently why I suggest audiobooks, because if they're good, then you can re-listen to them for motivation. Naval Ravikant, if you listen to his audio and podcast, he says reading is the best way to learn, which I think it normally is the best way to learn, but it's not the best way to motivate yourself, because you can use audio tapes or audio books to motivate yourself, and this is really good for that. So what is Turning Pro? This book is basically the methods you use to become a professional creative. And if you remember from The War of Art, the best way to do that is treat it like a job. And throughout this book, he talks a little bit about things that can get in your way, and more specifically in this book, he talks about addiction. And it's not just addiction to substances, it's addiction to other things. In this book, he starts talking about social media, and there's a professional and there's an amateur. And he says an amateur tweets where a professional does their work. And he talks about turning into a pro is showing up for yourself every day. And one of the quotes he says is, turning pro is a decision. And it's a decision that we have to recommit to every day. And I think that's very good advice. If you do want to be a pro, you can't just do it some of the times, right? You have to show up every single day, just like a job. And it is difficult to show up to a job every day because it can be very demotivating. And it's also very difficult working for yourself. So you have to make the decision to show up every day. And it's similar to The War of Art, where he says you can't focus on the money. You have to do it for the pursuit and your love of the pursuit. And he also talks about there's life before turning the pro and after turning pro, and how it completely changes. And he says it's similar to 9/11. You remember where you were when 9/11 happened. You'll remember where you were when you turned pro. And he gives a story about how that happened to him. And there's a lot of stories in here that he uses that lasts a while, and I don't think he necessarily needed the stories. They weren't that good, or they weren't the best, but he could have just given his advice. He didn't need the stories because the stories weren't that motivating. His advice and his quotes are very motivating. And he talks in this book about shadow careers, and I believe he talked about that in The War of Art. And the shadow career is what you might do during the day and how it's easy to do those shadow careers. And this is something I believe in very avidly, because sometimes people focus on their shadow careers too much, and they use that as an excuse to never pursue their creative pursuit. And I think that's pretty much why the world is the way it is. A lot of people focus on these shadow careers, and they follow these shadow careers, and that's why we have these huge monopolies, because they're not challenged by people that are awake and creatively and putting out their art out there. They could, or putting out or starting a business. And that's what he means too by turning pro. It could be turning pro as an entrepreneur. And not many people do that because it's difficult. But the people that do it, like Jeff Bezos, they believe avidly in their thoughts and they work on it every single day. And if we had more people doing that, starting their own business, working on their creative pursuits, the world would be a different place. And that's what he says. That's who we do it for. At the end of the day, like who are you doing this for? Are you doing it for yourself? No, you're doing it for your audience. Because a lot of us, myself included, can't do the things for ourselves. You have to understand that there's other people out there that need this content that you're going to put out, or this career, or this job, or a business that you're going to create. They need it, and it's going to take time, and it's going to be difficult. But if you show up every day, then it'll be possible. And he also talks about this. The importance of being a pro is because if you turn pro and you show up to your job every day, that's when creativity is going to hit. And he calls it a muse. That's when your muse is going to speak to you, is when you're there working on it every single day. That's when the idea is going to pop in your head. It's not going to be instantaneous and random. And when you're staring into the distance, it's going to be when you're working and getting better and building skills. And that's why you need to show up every day. And that's something I believe as well. It's very hard for most creative people to do. We often think it's just people that are motivated, but you have to do it even when you're not motivated. So you keep growing your skills and you keep working on that pursuit. And that's when creativity will hit you. He talks about muses and how the muse will sing to you, and she's a goddess and you have to do certain things to appease the goddess, like have order and that type of stuff. And really the last thing I wanted to talk about was, he has this concept, like if you're showing up to your pursuit every day, pursuing it like a job, it's very solitary. And I think most people are afraid of that. They're afraid of a solitary pursuit and doing it by themselves. They're afraid of silence. And he speaks about that. Silence and being with themselves are like the two things that people are afraid of. They try and escape their thoughts, and that's part of addiction. But pursuing your creative pursuit, if you show up every day to it, it's going to be lonely. And that's what he says here. But he also says no one's coming to save you. And that's something I believe in and I struggle with, is no matter what you do, whether you get married, have a family, they're not going to come and save you. You still have to pursue your creative pursuit. There's not going to be a ton of people around you helping you out. And that's something I agree with, because if you are going to create something from yourself, you have to be by yourself. You can't have a ton of people around you. It needs to be solitary. And I don't think many people understand this. And I don't think many self-help books talk about this, because if you read most self-help books about pursuing your passions, they always tell you to pay consultants to build a huge network and to be constantly networking. But at some point you need to create. You have to get down to basics and you create, and it's going to be lonely. And that's what you need to know. But it's not bad being lonely, because in that loneliness is where you create. And it's not going to be the feeling of loneliness. It's just your actual environment. You need to sit down in your craft and do it. And that's going to be you. But if you don't like that and you think somebody's going to save you and create your art for you, or tell you what to do to create your art, or provide you the perfect set of steps, they're not. And that's what most people need to understand. And the fact that he reaffirmed that for me was really good. And I think most people need to understand that. And most children, young people, whatever, need to understand that you're not going to have a million people around you. You're not going to have a team necessarily like you do in a job or in a career. If you want to create something that is yours, that contributes to the world, most of the times it's going to be a solitary pursuit, and nobody's going to come and rescue you except for you. And the more people that learn that, I think the more success we're going to have in this world. There is a time to ask for help and to pursue help and work in groups, but not necessarily in your own creative pursuit. So that's my summary, and those are the things that I learned from this book. Make sure to check out the description, because at some point I'll put a link to my review where I'll have some of this stuff, and I'll try and put as many quotes as I can in there as well. In order to get my future self-help recommendations and reviews, make sure to subscribe to this channel, like this video, comment in the comment section down below, and thanks for watching.